Hi there, my name is Mike Bloxham. I'm Executive Vice President, Global Media and Entertainment at Magid, and I'm with Zak Shaikh, who leads our consulting practice out of our Emotional DNA division. Today, Zak and I are going to talk about animation, which obviously is now a huge area of the TV entertainment landscape, and for that matter, movie space. And it's evolved a great deal. Since many of us were younger, when you'd think about cartoons on a Saturday morning, and it was, the Tom and Jerry's, the Scooby-Doo's, the Looney Tunes, a great franchise, very much all about fun, chaos, anarchic humor, very entertaining. Since that time, of course, there's been an explosion in animation and a massive diversification of the types of content. The different genres, left, right, and center. Fox has become a broadcast powerhouse in animation with titles like Simpsons and South Park and so on. Many, many more, and pretty much constantly more coming. And certainly since live action production has been curtailed as a result of the pandemic, animation has perhaps come even more to the fore. A lot of companies have lent into it simply because they've been able to create animated content for an audience which seems to have an almost insatiable appetite. Everything from the warm, the uplifting, the comforting kind of safe content, through to the crazy anarchic, almost subgenre in itself, the world of Dan Harmon, Rick and Morty, and so forth. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go, and some of the outputs of a fairly major analysis we've done into the whole category using emotional DNA data. One of the things we've been able to look at is how the perceived emotional tonalities of different parts of the animation landscape have evolved over time. And with luck, on your screens about now will be a chart which shows how the perceived emotional signature from an audience perspective has changed for the animation landscape as a whole since about 2014 to the current day. And what you can see there very clearly is that massive spike leading out to the edge of that graphic is a dimension of emotional tonality we call edge, which is driven by things that are fun, they're funny, they're crazy, they're outrageous is actually one of the characteristics which defines edge. That's always been a kind of through line tonally of animated content. It was there back in 2014. It's still there today. It's still very, very strong. But on the other side of that graphic, what you also see is that originality has increased, perceived originality of animated content. Partly, I think that's a reflection of the expanded diversity, but it's also a reflection of the level and type of creativity that people are now seeing within the animated landscape, which, as I said, has become much more diverse. Zak, you've obviously been deep in the weeds on this kind of work, this specific analysis as well. Tell us a little bit more about some of the nuanced takeaways that you've got about what's driving the evolution of animation today.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, obviously one of the things that's happened is there's been a complete diversification of the kinds of animated content. So you've got actually very different types of shows that have emerged. You've also got a lot more animated content that has come about. So this actual supply and volume of animated shows has increased a fair bit. So 10, 15 years ago, Fox Network was a home for a lot of animated shows. And you had, Comedy Central with South Park, and you had, a few places, and of course you still had your Nickelodeons and Disneys for the kids stuff. But since then, you've now got a number of shows come in. Adult Swim has blown up. Rick and Morty's really driven that. Netflix, Hulu, and obviously on the movie side, there's been a huge evolution with Pixar as well in the last 20 years. So one of the big things we've noticed is just the types of animated content has really grown. Now, the way that we've sort of attacked that, and to really try and understand and in a more formal, robust way, is we've done this thing called a taxonomy analysis. And what taxonomy analysis does is it takes all our data. So we ask respondents how they feel about all the content. We have a few hundred animated titles, both movies and TV shows. And what the cluster analysis does is it creates groups that are naturally aligned together based on their emotions. So you can then understand kind of an audience-based subgenre within animation. So rather than us going, well, that feels like adult animation, or that feels like adventure, it's driven by the audience's emotional perceptions. And when we did that analysis, we ended up with 6 really distinct categories, and 5 of those 6 scored on average above 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. So animation is a really loved category at large. It's continuing to evolve. This analysis late last year, I'd say even now there could be more categories, because Netflix has just released a ton of new animated content. But what I would say is that because it's become so diverse, there is now clear white space, and there also is not just white space. There's also should be a strategy for everyone within the landscape to have their own animation strategy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really interesting things about this. Now that we're able to look at animation through the lens of taxonomies, because there is such diversity within the set, it then becomes really interesting to ask the question, particularly of those networks or platforms that don't have a history in animation, like Comedy Central, like Fox. And you say, well, if AMC were to look for a new kind of content with its massive credentials in scripted drama, you say, well, what would animation look like on AMC? What would it look like on Discovery, somewhere else that's never really played with animation? And yet with all the vast array of subject matter that it addresses, could Discovery Plus lean into animation in some way? And what would it look like? It would certainly be very different from what AMC would look like, to leverage the strengths of the brand and what the audience expects. But clearly there's an opportunity now to explore, and we can see this because obviously we have the luxury of the data, explore, whether you're looking at movies or TV content, how a strategy can be evolved to take advantage of white space in animation for different kinds of networks that frankly have never even looked at the subject before.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I think that you look at what your strengths are as a network, both from what your strengths as a brand, and also the portfolio of content you've got. And you could look at, say, a Discovery, and you can see that being informative, being intelligent, these are real strengths of Discovery. So then you can map that and then go, okay, well, how does that look in animation? Have there been any animated shows that have that? There may have been 1 or 2 attempted, but really it's a white space, and that's an area they could leverage. And I think network, each platform can kind of do that mapping exercise and go, okay, if we have our own animation strategy, where is it? How do we execute playing to our brand strengths?
Yeah, and it may be that you look at it and you say, actually, the data says it's not for us, which is a result in itself. But either way, I think it's a rich area for exploration. And at a time when the demand for more and more compelling content is only getting greater, I think it's safe to say that animation is just going to carry on becoming a larger and larger slice of the video ecosystem. If you're interested in the graphic or any of the other subject matter we talked about off the back of this analysis of the animation space, you'll be able to download a briefing that we're bringing out, and that link is either above, below, or possibly to the side of this video, depending on where you're viewing. Equally, if you'd like to talk to either Zak or I about the subject, we'd love to hear from you, so do feel free to reach out.